So let's continue on with this idea of the customer experience. We've really set the stage fairly well, so we can move through this slide. The customer experience represents the overall impression that a client has upon completing a purchase. Maybe we're buying shoes online. We already gave the grocery shopping example. Or maybe we're buying raw materials for a vendor. We're a manufacturer, and we have a raw materials vendor in Penang, Malaysia, that we buy from regularly. Could be any variety of environments. Again, it's driven by the type of model that we operate in. But that customer experience, regardless of the model, second bullet point, should be a function of the value prop, where we as a company identify every facet of what we do that entices people to buy from us repeatedly and link it to the customer experience. This takes us to the second to the last bullet point here, and a process orientation, something that we've talked about on numerous occasions. The quality of the customer experience, the output, the result, depends on its inputs. What are some of the inputs? The product itself, its price, lead times, packaging considerations, online customer service support. That's what we're talking about. All of those inputs create the output, which is the customer experience. And gave it away a little bit, but in our last bullet point, these inputs that create outputs are the key characteristics of a process. So can we say, although difficult to quantify, that customer service is a process? I think we can. Not quantitatively easy to measure, but a process nonetheless, based on the definition that a process output is a function of its inputs. The value prop is the inputs, the output is the customer experience. It's good to think in those terms. So continuing along even further with this idea, the service component of the customer experience process. First bullet point, customer service is composed of all of the client-facing activities, everything that the customer comes in contact with, that a company engages in before, during, and after a sale. Pre-sale, sale, and post-sale, to use some different terminology. So once again, depending on our business model, if we're a retailer, is the customer experience going to be influenced by by a customer's in-store sales experience? Sales associates that were nowhere to be found versus the other extreme where sales associates are breathing down people's necks? I think definitely. A product engineer at a client's factory, the installation of electrical motors, to use our previous example, or backup generators. Is the treatment received from that product engineer at a client's factory part of a process? Absolutely. Does it influence the customer experience? Undoubtedly. Installation teams, maybe 2-3 people going to a large factory or operation to install some production equipment. That's another example. Technical support via chat, or that simple 1-800 telephone representative that is accessible and knowledgeable. So these activities are what are sometimes referred to as touch points, as we see in our last bullet here. They have to be clearly identified as part of crafting the value prop in the customer experience, because one is a function of the other. The service component of the customer experience process, continuing on, every touch point has to enhance the overall customer experience and generate a positive interaction. So whether it's contact with the engineer in the factory, the installation team in the factory, the post-installation technical support online, all of those things have to build upon one another and generate a positive interaction. Ideally, and this is introducing a term from the world of Six Sigma, continuous improvement initiative Six Sigma, is that customer service should be a reflection of the voice of the customer. There's an old line from the Total Quality Management School that states, the voice of the customer speaks the loudest. It really asks us to walk a mile, to use some other terminology, to walk a mile in our customers' shoes. How do they view their experience? What are those touch points? What is most important to that customer? And within that framework, second bullet point, continuing on, to identify the reasonable expectations a customer would have given the business model. So if it's an online purchase, is it reasonable for me as a customer to assume that I can complete the purchase of 5 items in 20 minutes if I know exactly what it is I want to buy? That's a reasonable expectation. The system has to support that activity. And once those criteria are established, always seek to surpass those expectations. So the first step, looking at our last bullet point here, the first step in that process is to identify who the customer really is. And this is where that discussion around internal and external customers becomes so important. So let's define an internal customer. And it makes really good sense, although sometimes people don't realize it in the workplace. But if we're especially talking about supply chain and the themes that have resonated throughout our modules, integration, interdependency, resonance, it makes even more sense, because internal customers are the departments and people in an organization that rely on colleagues to complete their portion of the value prop. So we'll see these examples again in just a bit. But do purchasing people that are buying from vendors overseas depend on the logistics team to execute on their model? Absolutely. That makes the purchasing people an internal customer of the logistics team. That's just one example. We have many more moving forward, but that's what we're talking about here. So the concept, bullet point number 2, is based on the idea that within a process and a company, one person's output becomes another person's input. So if I work in accounting and I have to do credit checks on new customers, is my credit check an output for the salesperson to use in their sales activities? Most definitely. That's just another example. Last bullet point, that service that we provide to internal customers is always going to impact the service given to external customers, to external clients, the people that actually buy our products and services. So we might be in a position in our organization that by its very definition, we very rarely, if ever, come in contact with the actual customers, the people that buy our product. But are we influencing that customer's experience by how we treat our internal colleagues, our internal customers? Unequivocally. And we have to look at those colleagues as indeed internal customers and view ourselves as customers of our colleagues too. That's a powerful concept. So let's look at some examples. I mentioned a few, but let's bring a few more into the mix here. Internal customer relationships and global supply chain management. Well, we already used the first one. Purchasing professionals depend on the logistics department for timely delivery. We've said over and over again that materials planning, which is really what purchasing people do in essence, depends in part on accurate and stable lead times. Is lead time a logistics function? There's absolutely no question about that. That's just one way in which purchasing professionals depend on the logistics department. Do purchasing people need visibility into the logistics chain to determine when goods will be delivered? Is it the logistics department that can tell a purchasing agent that the goods they bought in China are sitting in customs somewhere? Yes, it is. That's an internal customer relationship. Some others, we mentioned this one as well, salespeople need the accounting department to run credit checks on new customers quickly. Any salesperson will tell you that one of the best ways to lose an order is to have the credit check take too long. That's an internal customer relationship. The factory, some new ones here. The factory relies on the MRP group, Material Requirements Planning Group, to have raw materials available for production. Definitely internal colleague-client relationship. And then everybody, we all know this, depends on the IT department to make sure all of the company's technology works. So everybody is a client of the IT. Anyone whose email has gone down knows that.